Hey guys, welcome back to the Magfed Ranch Paintball channel, and today I'm going to be shooting a video for Final Inspect Fridays. But before I get into it guys, subscribe to the channel, right? Smash that like button, turn on your notification bell so that way you're notified when I post new videos. And of course, obviously comment and share at the end of this video, okay guys? So guys, today's topic for Final Inspect Fridays is, should you zero your Magfed marker? Okay, and when I talk about zeroing your marker, of course, I'm talking specifically, like I always do on this channel, about first strike shooting Magfed markers, right? You know, because honestly, there's really, I guess there are possibly a valid reason to zero your marker using round ball, but let's be honest, the distance at which it would zero at and what it would, actually be accurate at enough, the group size, at that point, your I guess necessity to zero, use a red dot, use a scope of some sort, a crossbow scope or whatever, what have you, it's not really necessary at that short of a distance, right? We're talking probably 15 yards and in. So first strike rounds, right? So it has to be using first strike rounds because obviously these things are way more accurate, and of course they can fly, obviously fly out to a longer distance. Okay, so that's obviously the premise of today's topic, is zeroing with first strike rounds in your Magfed marker. Before we get into it, should we? I guess let's give the one, let's go over the most important reason, which is why, right? Why should we zero our markers? Okay, let's talk about first strike rounds first. Right? The first strike rounds are really expensive. If you buy a case of 600, you're looking roughly around 40 to 45 cents a round. I'm pretty sure with the cost of inflation, everything's starting to go up. I'm sure these bad boys are going to continue to keep going up. I don't see them going down anytime soon. So there might be a point in time where these things will be 50 cents a round. And it wastes a lot of money if you're having to fire more than one round or obviously multiple rounds to hit your target, because you're trying to just kind of walk the rounds onto your target, or you're just trying to kind of point shoot and not really getting an accurate hit. So money savings, right? Just a side note, for example, the match grade rounds that we make, we don't make them, but we obviously sell them after sorting them and organizing them to the different match grade qualities. They're over 65, 70 cents, $1 a round, depending on which round you get. Obviously, they're very expensive. I haven't had any takers on it, but at the same time, just that time to do it and the cost of the first strike rounds in general, that is a huge, important reason on why you would want to zero your marker, so that way it would save cost of having to fire more rounds than necessary to eliminate your target. Okay, so the second reason I would say is performance, of course, right? After cost, you want the best performance for your marker, your equipment, for your setup, right? So if you can take that, even let's talk about CQB distances, right? If you can take, less shots to eliminate your target, and a very fast shot at that, to eliminate your target, and you're having to, shoot less rounds on target to make that elimination, it's going to be faster, it's going to be more efficient. There's a less likely chance of you obviously being eliminated by the opposing player. That's an important performance increase that we have to consider. I don't know if a lot of you guys, shoot real steel as well too. There's a reason why the firearms industry has, transitioned from just using your basic iron sights, and I'll show you that guys here, right? Let me choose a marker here. Let's say something like our MR18 Mod 1 marker, right? And the iron sights is literally just these flip up, sights, right? Now, guys, go check out my other videos why I talk about the backup iron sights and zeroing the backup iron sights. But obviously with real steel, this is nowhere, it's not as fast as using a red dot or using some type of optic. I think there's enough videos out there, there's enough evidence out there on the differences of how fast you can engage a target using an optic versus using your iron sights. But when it comes to Magfed paintball, it's even more important because when you're wearing goggles, you can't even use the backup iron sights, right? Because your goggles forces your head to sit up so high that you're not even able to look through the optic, right? So you need some type of riser, and specifically, I found that the FSR riser is the correct height. You need minimum 2.5 inches, but 3 inches is ideal above the top of the receiver to be able to look through the red dot or scope correctly without having to, kink your head over so much just to see through the scope. So that's a huge part. So yeah, so with the zeroing using an optic, you're going to be able to get faster hits. You're going to be able to get faster performance. You're going to be able to use less rounds to hit your target, which goes, obviously going to save cost and give you that better performance. Again, that's just at the short distance, okay? Now let's talk about, when you start getting into the longer distances, right? So if you have something like our, the SDMR here that has a crossbow scope on it, right? And now we're talking about engaging targets past 40 yards, right? I mean, the red dot to me, in my testing guys, I think it's very effective from CQB distances out to 60 yards per se. You can use the adjustable riser, click it down about, I believe the clicks is about 6 or 8 clicks to be able to hit the target out to 60 yards effectively. But in essence, you can use the adjustable riser after you've zeroed your red dot to engage targets effectively out to the longer distances, okay? But with the magnified crossbow scope, because your reticle has the compensating drops built into the reticle, you can engage targets out to 80 yards that I've seen. Guys, go check out my video. I showed you guys that in my videos where I'm using the crossbow scope. You can effectively engage targets out to 80 yards without using the riser. You can literally just use the reticle holds inside the crossbow scope and engage targets from CQB all the way out to the 80-yard distance. And of course, with the adjustable riser, then at that point you can engage targets 100 yards past 100 yards, right? And so in essence, it's just speed and accuracy of hits. And let's talk about accuracy real quick. With the magnification, right, most of the crossbow scopes typically have a 2.5 magnification once it's zeroed in correctly and dialed in correctly. That's going to give you a way better sight picture at the further distances, especially up to 100 yards. If that's kind of like our maximum ideal engagement range that we want to use our Magfed markers at. You're going to get a better sight picture, you're going to be able to get hits on target faster, and that's going to lead to better performance, right? You're going to be able to engage targets that you couldn't effectively do with just using point shooting techniques or even a red dot, okay? So to me, those two are the big whys, right? It's going to be cost of savings and performance. And I don't think there's one that's more than the other. I'm just telling you guys, I think those are the two huge reasons why you would want to zero your marker using first strike rounds, okay? So now that we have the why out of the way, right, that should pretty much tell you, yes, you should zero your marker, okay? Now let's talk about zeroing your marker, okay? Right, what do you guys, if some of you guys have zeroed your marker out there, what do you zero them at? I personally, and in our testing, we zero our markers at 20 yards. And the reason for that, guys, is let's start with the backup iron sights. So we know with the goggles, the backup iron sights don't work, right? It sits too low for your head to be able to see the backup iron sight. However, the zero, if you were just using your Magfed marker like a day at the range, for example, and you were just trying to get some plinking in and engage some targets with the iron sights, the iron sights in our testing have typically zeroed at 20 yards with the rifles. Okay, so that's kind of why we use, well, that's only one of the reasons why we zero our rifle markers in at 20 yards. The other reason, the big reason, is because of the crossbow scopes. Okay, guys? Most of the crossbow scopes, it needs to be zeroed in at 20 yards. For example, this one by Lumix, right? This is the, True Glow. This is your Opti Speed, okay? Or even if you get into something like the Lumix Killer Instinct, right? Or the Hawk XB1, they're all zeroed in at 20 yards, okay? And at that 20 yard, once you zero it in at 20 yards, then the rest of the reticle holds are fairly close to the distances that the reticle is saying that's at. So like at 40 yards, you hold that reticle at 40 yards and the FSR will hit the target. It's only when you start going out to the 60 yards and beyond that the reticle holds start becoming not one-to-one, and you might have to hold it a little bit higher than what the reticle is saying for those distances. But at least you have a way to gauge those holds now. Real quick side note, I haven't had any experience with the Karmatech Supremacy scope, but I know that scope is more designed with first strike rounds, and so its holds will probably be more accurate. Without knowing much about it, my only concern with that scope would be that it's kind of busy. There's quite a lot of different holds and information in that reticle. I think it'd be a great sniper reticle where you're having more time to take the shot. But for something like a DMM setup, where you might have to engage targets at longer distances and close range distances, this is a lot easier to snap from, let's say, 100 yards back down to 60 yards, back down to 40 yards, because those holds are fairly close. Okay, so yeah, so 20 yards is where we set our zero at, and that's the reason for it, is mostly because of the iron sights, but more specifically because of the crossbow scopes. Now the red dot scopes, of course, you can adjust it to whichever zero you want, 10 yards, 20 yards, but just to keep everything consistent, we usually recommend just zeroing it to 20 yards as well too. And so that way, you get kind of an even starting point with all the different markers, okay? Now, quick side note, the only crossbow scope that I've tested that has a non-20 yard zero is this one right here. This setup right here, I think is pretty cool. This is our new IAR M27 clone marker. As you guys can see, it looks like the new Marines, HEK Marines rifle that they use, but this is the UTG 4x scope. So it's just a 4x magnification, no speed ring. It's, like I said, it's just a fixed magnification. It's almost kind of like using an ACOG. And that particular scope, it has to be zeroed in at 10 yards is what its instructions tell you. Guys, I have a video of me zeroing that scope, so go check out that video. But yeah, so you have fixed scopes, you have variable speed scopes, you have red dots, right? And of course, maybe some of you out there don't zero your markers at all, but I've also, like I said, I'm making a case to zero your marker. Now, let's talk about why the zero, in a way, kind of in essence, the breakdown of the zero, right? So it's just like real firearms, right, guys? So as you can see with the marker, there's obviously a distance on which the red dot sits above, or even the scope, of course, sits above the top of the receiver, right? Typically, like I said, with the FSR adjustable riser, it's about 3 inches. So when you go to fire the marker, And let's say both of these things are just pointed straight, right? So, you know, the red dot, if you imagine an imaginary line coming out of the red dot, and of course the first strike round, if it doesn't, you know, drop due to gravity, if it literally just comes straight out, regardless of where you aim, it's going to hit 3 inches below your target, right? So you're gonna have to aim a little bit higher to hit where you wanna hit. Well, when you go to zero your marker, in essence, what you're doing is, I'm kind of simulating it here with the FSR adjustable riser, right? But in essence, you're adjusting the elevation and of course the windage if necessary in your optic, so that way the rifle is kind of slightly canted up like this. So that way when this red dot, if you imagine once again a laser coming out of it, and it's zeroed at 20 yards, the rifle barrel is pointed up correctly, so that way it'll hit right where the red dot is aiming at 20 yards. Because of course, like any projectile, right, the gravity is going to come into play. So the round, the FSR round is going to start dropping as soon as it comes out the barrel. And so you have to kind of compensate for that trajectory curve, right, just like a real firearm. And then of course, that curve is going to be more pronounced when you get to the longer distances. That's the reason why, you know, at the 40 yards, 60 yards, you're going to have to tilt the marker up more and more to achieve those hits, right? It's kind of like you're, in essence, lobbing the projectile onto the target. Although it's nowhere near as huge of a lob as, let's say, round ball is, right? For example, the crossbow scope has the same theory, right? If we talk about how there's a laser coming out of the crossbow scope, to get it to zero, we would need to adjust the elevation and of course the windage in there, so that way it's like it's tilted up like this, right? So even though you're looking into the optic, what you think is straight, the gun is actually slightly tilted up to hit that 20-yard zero. And then when you use the reticles in there, for example, if I had to use an 80-yard reticle hold, I have to tilt the marker up to about this to see that 80-yard crosshair, right, to be on target. So you're going to have to elevate the marker up to achieve that hold and that hit. So that's kind of the basics, mechanics on why we're having to do that. So that's the zero, guys. That's the distance that we do at, you know, for our markers, 20 yards. The reasons why we do it. And like I said, the performance is super fast. One of my videos, I'll show you guys where I literally go from a 20-yard zero to a 40-yard zero, just transition really fast. And I think I even maybe did a 60-yard zero. But in essence, I'm just transitioning from the different distances using the crossbow scope. And I can hit three shots on target at the distances really fast. And that's the advantage you have when zeroing your marker correctly and using the correct holds. So yeah, guys, I mean, is that something you guys take credence in it? Do you guys go and to make sure that you guys zero your marker so that way you're getting the highest performance out of your Magfed marker possible? And then of course the cost savings, right? So that way you're not having to shoot excessive first strike rounds to engage your target. And then plus, you know, going back to performance, last thing you want is to miss your target. They see that someone's firing at them and now, you know, you haven't hit your target. It would be better to eliminate your target on that first or second shot. Okay, guys? So yeah, comment, let me know what you guys think. You know, should we start progressing as a community to push for zeroing and obviously first strike round usage? I know I'm doing that. That's my goal here at Magfed Ranch. But yeah, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts and comments on it. Appreciate it. I'll check you guys next time. Peace.